But we get the rally the day after the Fed meeting rather than the day of. By we're going to have a soft landing, not going to be a recession. We're looking to see if the trend lines would break out. S&P above overhead resistance, Nasdaq the declining trend line. If we pull back first and then go higher, but I was looking for a bigger rally. I've been talking about the Dow was up 1.25%, up 522 points. Certain things going on with the Dow at major resistance levels. The S&P up 1.70%, up 95 points. The highs of the session, the Dow was up 1.5%. The S&P was up nearly 2%. Nasdaq was up 3%. Nasdaq was up 2.5% here. Close to that with the Nasdaq 100. Russell was up over 2%. Talking about the VIX in a moment, the VIX dropped over 10%, being back below the 50-period moving average. Historical data, the VIX is predicting either Friday or Monday a down day on the S&P 500 because of a drop of greater than 10% on the VIX. We get this big rally. Why? Because the Fed has canceled the recession. No longer going to have a recession. And Yellen told us 2 weeks ago we're not going to have a recession. We're going to have a soft landing. Powell's telling us all yesterday in the press conference, his new buzzword, talking about the Fed is lowering rates for all the right reasons. We're going to keep the expansion going. We're not going to have a recession. And you get the experts on the financial channels this morning. Fed's 50 basis point cut guarantees now we're not going to have a recession. Recession is right around the corner, but topping process. Now we're getting the propaganda. The Fed survey earlier out of CNBC told us, no, we're going to have a soft landing. This happens at every top. Recession indicators warn it's about to happen. Experts tell us, no, it's not. The rally now talked about, again, the S&P going higher, whether it would pull back and go higher, that the Nasdaq would turn off the trend line and then go higher. I told you Nasdaq's going to 20,400. S&P is going to go somewhere between 5750, 6,000. Talked about the trend lines at great length and detail. Rally today. Now, the Fed has officially canceled the recession. So happy days are here again. No more worries. One reason why I believe the S&P being higher, warning you, is going to go back and fill the gap in July and go higher, and I still think it's going to go higher. Nasdaq hasn't filled its gap. We see this at every top. Again, they got to suck all the bulls in, pull the rug out from under them. Yesterday, they pushed it down. Trend line of resistance on Nasdaq, tucked in the shorts, and then we got a short squeeze today. Institutions play a lot of games. Do this at every top. And just know we're in a topping process, and it's likely not done. Still going to go higher, but the Fed officially canceled the recession, so happy days are here again. We could just ignore all the indicators that are telling us we're about to have a recession and believe the propaganda, drink the Kool-Aid, all these so-called experts that are telling us, oh no, we're going to have a soft landing. I guarantee you we're going to have a recession, and the market will begin to price that in. We'll start seeing more weakness, like indicators, signs of recession, and the Fed will begin to try to prevent it. Oh, no. Person after person tell me, we can't have a topping process right now. We're not in a recession. By the time the recession hits, the stock market will have already started pricing it in. Market starts pricing things in 3, 6 months, 9 months before they happen. And I believe we're in a topping process, but now drinking the Kool-Aid. I told you, I'm looking for higher highs on S&P, and I'm looking for that gap to fill at 20,400. I don't think the topping process is done yet. We can rest assured that there would not be a recession now. It has canceled the recession according to the experts. It's a guy that I saw this morning, 50 basis point cut ensures we're not going to have a recession. Will be a soft landing. They say this at every recession, every time. Soft landing baloney. Fed's policies lead to negative outcomes. Always. It may take time, but it always leads to a negative outcome. Now, yesterday I told you to be watching the VIX. Back above the 50 period. Could it stay there? If it did stay there, we could Nasdaq turn down off its trend line, get a pullback before going and trying to make higher highs. Lost the 50 period here, the green line. Then again, they see Nasdaq go parabolic, fill the gap at 20,400. Back below the 50 period moving average, the S&P and Nasdaq gap higher. Show you those charts in this video. And Nasdaq is eventually going to go to 20,400, fill the gap. That happens, S&P will likely be peaking somewhere between 5,750 and 6,000. I have a lower range of the 5,750, 800, higher range of the 59 to 6,000 area. Momentum had turned bearish. The momentum line had turned bearish for Nasdaq yesterday on the 4-hour chart, not for the S&P 500. Again, likely see a divergence develop over time here, some pullbacks, higher highs, late September on into the first part of October, complete the topping process, much like what we had back over here. And again, S&P has likely not topped yet. That hasn't filled the gap at 20,400. Again, in the daily time frame, momentum is bullish. We have a bullish reversal of conditions. Momentum, I'm showing you that in this video. I showed you yesterday. Momentum line continues to be bullish in the daily time frame. Signals continue to be bullish. Actually, we're going to go fill the gap at 20,400. Do we do it parabolically or do we pull back first? Momentum's positive, but there's a shaded area here. So again, what happens with that? Eventually, that could be the signal that eventually takes us up here, even if we pull back. Momentum signals are bullish. I hope you hear what I'm saying. Talked about this yesterday. Topping process I'm looking for, I do not believe it's done. I do believe Nasdaq topped back over here. We'll set up a lower high, but I think that the topping process is still under construction. I'm looking for Nasdaq to eventually go to 20,400 and overthrow it, not to crash. Then completing the topping process, start a reversal, and usher in the bear market. You got a good shot that happens over the next few weeks. Long-term trend lines that we're looking at. Please support the channel with the link directly below. It allows me to be able to provide you this information. The link, it'll take you to a secured site. Donate any amount you want. I don't have any sponsors. Turn all those offers down. I don't want to sell you anything. Just ask that you do what you can to help out. Please consider following the link below, supporting the channel today. Thank you. As I pointed out yesterday, momentum signals in the daily time frame remain bullish. Above the 10-period moving average, you have a green cloud, blue bars, forming a divergence on the MACD. We're going to see some kind of sell-off. We've got to see a shift in momentum, and momentum is bullish right now. The 10 below the 20, now it's trying to get above the 20-period moving average. Looks like it's just a fraction underneath it. Again, I think over the next few weeks, so here in the weekly time frame, as soon as late September, maybe by early to mid-October. Again, I think you complete this multiple point divergence. And I think we get the reversal with that and complete the topping process. P weekly chart here. And I still think we go higher. 5750, 6,000. I've shown you the trend lines I'm watching. I think for Nasdaq, but I think we end up getting a lower high at the 20,400 area. I'd be wrong about the peak over here. And the upper channel line will be hit again. Just slightly above this level, but again, the guts to tell you what I think, and I think that was the top. Daily chart, I told you, again, momentum is still bullish in the daily time frame. We tried to turn on Nasdaq in the 4-hour time frame, now back to bullish. Through these charts yesterday, momentum remains bullish. Carry Nasdaq parabolic to 20,400 to fill the gap. You had a pullback or a back test along the way of the broken trend line. Sign of strength today, breaking above the trend line that I've been talking about in every single video. Again, momentum bullish. We're above the 50-period moving average. We try to turn off of the trend line I talked about. Third attempt, we clear it and close above it. Nasdaq daily chart. Some reversal bars at resistance. S&P and Nasdaq. Those bars were going to play out. We needed to get confirmation of fall through. We did not. Those tails were negated. Watching the trend line on the Nasdaq, I'll show it to you again. Rally today is on fake news. Again, these experts on the financial channels saw them again this morning. Oh, the Fed did a 50 basis point cut, now ensuring there will be no recession. We're getting headlines like this that the 10-year Treasury yield jumps as investors bet there'll be no recession ahead. Again, it's a bunch of poppycock. Experts do this at every top. We're in a topping process. In the last 2 hours of trading, we saw Bitcoin get above its trend line. We saw Nasdaq 100 futures do it, and that created this gap. Now, again, we've had 2 failed attempts to get above the trend line. I told you, getting above the trend line is bullish, a sign of strength. Rejection at the trend line is a sign of weakness. We got a topping tail. We got a black candlestick. Either one of those candlesticks were confirmed or got a fall through. I talked about topping tails in yesterday's video. Again, in order for candles to mean anything, we get confirmation and a fall through. Now we get a candle of indecision. Even if we pull back on Nasdaq, I still expect we're going to 20,400. Nasdaq peaked over here on July 10th. I think S&P, again, make more closing highs. I think once Nasdaq fills this gap, I think S&P will top. Trend line that I told you that I've been watching, 2 failed attempts to try to clear it. The third attempt we do. If we back test it and fill the gap, or just go parabolic, forming triple negative divergence now on the hourly chart. Nasdaq already peaked over here. I believe the Dow is completing a topping process right now. I think S&P 500 still going to go higher, but I think it'll peak within 2 to 3.5, almost 4 weeks after the Fed pivot. Historically, that is what has happened. It didn't follow the same pattern. Historically, in a rally, at pivot day 2001, 2007, we got a down day for resistance levels, horizontal resistance on S&P, declining trend line here, but we got above them. That's a sign of strength. Be clear. Continue to believe we're going to get a Fed pivot rally. Now, I told you we may get a pullback, then go higher. We may break up through this trend line and go. Candlesticks were not confirmed. We broke up through it. Probably back test the trend line, fill the gap, maybe fill the gap or back test the trend line anyways, if the divergences begin to play out on the 60-minute charts. And I'm not looking for a Nasdaq crash, okay? I'm looking for a Nasdaq rally, eventually reach 20,398. That will likely happen late September or more likely early October to mid-October. The spinning top's a candle of indecision. It could be a continuation or a reversal bar. If it is a reversal bar, we can back test the trend line. Maybe try to fill the gap. I said, again, if we break through the trend line, which we've now done, could just keep going parabolic up to fill this gap sooner rather than later. Bullish things happening. We're getting the 50 and the 60-minute time frame back above the 200 with our gap higher and parameters in positive territory. So again, this is bullish for the Nasdaq. Today we had a gap and go. Prices gapped higher and kept going. Again, here on the 60-minute chart, you can see the failed attempts to get above the trend line. Now we clearly got above it and we closed above it. Negative diversion. So we'll be watching to see, do we pull back, try to fill the gap, or back test the trend line? Parabolic or pullback, regardless how it plays out. Again, I think we're coming up here to the 20,400 area. Actually fill the gap in a large ABC move, or maybe complex corrective pattern in a WXY. Powell used the word recalibration multiple times in his press conference. We get the spin. This is telling us, oh, the Fed's lowering rates for all the right reasons. Keep the economy, the expansion going. It's not because there's a recession. And we're getting this pure propaganda on the financial channels. Turn on any of them. Bloomberg, Fox Business News, CNBC. They're all saying the same thing. Oh, no. Have a soft landing. And again, this is what is fueling today's rally, is propaganda from the so-called experts, financial media telling us, oh, no, what recession? I've talked about this before. It's like the emperor is naked. Retail. If you dare to say you're not going to have a soft landing, going to have a bear market, well, you're just, a Neanderthal. Not in the club. This me. All these people, they go on there, they stick together. You even got, I talked about yesterday, Claudia Somm, who created a great indicator about it over and over. It's predicting a recession right now. The moving average is half a point above the low from the last 12 months. It's predicting we're about to have a recession. She's dismissing her own indicator. Watched her yesterday on CNBC talking about what the Fed needs to do for the soft landing and all this other junk. Because, again, if you don't believe, see the invisible garment that the emperor is wearing, then you're dumb. Only the wise can see it. Only the wise can see the soft landing. People are absolutely amazing. I said the king went out, or the emperor went out, paraded throughout the kingdom to show his new garment that only the wise could see, his invisible garment. Some fool yelled out, the emperor is naked. I promise you, we're going to have a recession. The indicators are saying it's going to be approximately 3 to 6 months away. The market will begin to price that in. Now, we have the steepening of the yield curve. The yield curve has uninverted. It's warning we're about to have a recession. It's the longest inversion in history. Probably going to be a doozy of a recession. These experts telling us, oh, no. This thing is going to be correct over and over again. When the uninversion takes place, recession falls and the stock market out and begins to move into a bear market. The experts, their propaganda is, oh, no, rates are normalizing. And a lot of these people on these financial channels, they come from institutions, and the institutions are selling into the rally. Just look at the Nasdaq. Propaganda is rates are normalizing. That's the propaganda. Listen to me carefully. Just one other thing about these divergences. It might be that we start a brand new divergence here into late September or early October, mid-October, whatever, that takes a couple of weeks to set up. So do keep that in mind. Same thing for the Nasdaq. This divergence right here may have just given us a pullback, those failed attempts to break the trend line. We might start a brand new, fresh divergence here if we go higher, or again, going forward. Again, this just may cause us to pull back or fill the gap, back test the trend line here. Keep all that in mind. I don't think Nasdaq is topped. I don't know the path it takes. I didn't know if we were going to get a bigger pullback and go higher, or if we're going to try to do it immediately, or maybe now pull back and go higher, however it unfolds. This is where I think we're headed for an ABC move. So do keep that in mind. I'm just showing you, again, we had other times a big Fed pivot rally the very day of the Fed pivot, and have that. It doesn't have to unfold the exact same way that it has in the past. No, the market is going to begin to price in recession. The recession indicators that are extremely reliable are telling us it's coming. Yesterday, the Dow was turning off rising resistance, still halting there. Could be topping. I think Nasdaq already did. Nasdaq was turning off a declining resistance that got above it. And the S&P 500 turned off horizontal resistance, now getting above it. I told you, I didn't know if we get a pullback and then go higher, or just go higher immediately and try to break this level. I talked about the topping tails. Do they needed confirmation and a follow-through? We did not get it. The third attempt, we've gotten above it. I'll show you the S&P. I want to compare this to the S&P daily chart, the Dow. I also want to say, if you hear me saying, if you're hearing me say, oh, the Nasdaq's about to crash, you're not listening to what I'm saying. The Nasdaq is about to rally. Maybe it pulls back. Maybe it doesn't. But it's about to rally towards 20,400. And I think it will go lower high. If I'm wrong, it will go up and hit the trend line just above this peak over here on the weekly chart. That will peak in late September, early to mid-October. I think over the next couple of weeks, we're going to see the market top out. Nasdaq will complete a double top. The trend line, would we clear it, or would we pull back and then clear it? I talked about that yesterday. We attempted to turn down off of it, and then we gapped higher. Compare this to the S&P. S&P got a topping tail at horizontal resistance. A topping tail shooting star, just like the Dow. It was not confirmed. I said yesterday, as I talk about the candlesticks, candlestick patterns are meaningless unless you get a confirmation and a follow-through. I was looking for that. Bitcoin moved higher after the stock market closed. Final 2 hours of trading or so, hour and a half, 2 hours, the trend line. And then we saw Nasdaq 100 futures do it, and we saw the Nasdaq 100 cash do it. Here we get a candle of indecision. We gapped higher. If you are hearing me say the S&P is about to crash, you're not listening to what I'm saying. It is in a topping process. I think it will complete a top, be as soon as 2 weeks after the Fed, towards late September for the first rate cut, or likely mid to early October. 2001 and 2007, the first rate cut rallied 17 to 19 sessions. Have to do that. This pattern is looking very similar. 2022 top. It may be a week or two that we see the peak and start to reverse. It happens sooner. I mean, we didn't big Fed pivot rally initially. We got it today, but it did it differently. It doesn't have to do it the exact same way as I've talked about. I told you again, S&P is going to close above this level. It has now done so. S&P reached 57.33 at the high. I told you the trend lines in the monthly time frame are 5750 area, the 6,000 level. Now, which trend line, including or excluding the shadows, I've talked about it great length and detail in Monday's video. So I'm looking for a topping process. That will complete, we'll get a reversal, and we'll start the bear market. Recession, we'll start seeing more signs of recession. All the experts now, we had the NBC Fed survey earlier, the experts telling us, oh no, we have the soft landing, and then more propaganda today. What you got to do is turn on these financial channels, and you hear the same stuff. Recession indicators that I'm talking about, employment rate triggering the Psalm rule, the inverted yield curve, have a proven track record to be correct. Take these indicators over these so-called phony experts any day of the week. These guys are so convinced we're going to have this bull market for the next 2 years, selling into the rallies. We're seeing it more on the Nasdaq, but we're seeing this selling near the highs. Why is that happening? And a candle of indecision. We'll be watching to see what happens here. But again, we try to peak late September. Could be early to mid-October. We are forming a very similar divergence to what we have on the Dow. Again, I think Nasdaq has already peaked. Actually, when it fills the gap at 20,400, S&P will peak. Dow could possibly be peaking right now. At the 2000 top, the Dow peaked before the S&P 500. And here's the divergences, and this is going right into the upper channel line. Again, we're slamming into rising resistance on the Dow. The weekly chart slightly overthrowing it, forming this negative divergence. Had the topping tail and the shooting star candlestick yesterday. Again, no confirmation. Again, the patterns were negated in that we closed back above the highs from yesterday, canceling out those patterns. Did you hear what I just said? Get candle patterns constantly, but they have to be confirmed to get a follow-through. A little bit more about the Dow in a second. Let me go back to the S&P. I was talking about the daily and the divergences that are forming here. Again, might give us a pullback. Watching today's gaps. Broken trend line on Nasdaq and on Bitcoin. The Dow was up about 1.5% at the highs. S&P was up about 2% at the highs. We pulled back off of the highs. Nasdaq was up about 3% at the highs. So let's look at the price action here on the 60-minute chart. Here it is. We had these topping tails in the intraday time frame. We got a confirmation bar of them, but no follow through to the downside, and then we gapped higher. Futures tend to move up on lighter volume with this gap. So a lot of this is short covering. They get their kicks, sucking in people to buy when we get breakouts, buying peaks, and then rug out from under them, and then it look like things are going to turn, creating gaps and creating short squeezes. These people get their jollies, posing people. Nevertheless, again, we had a divergence. We had those failed attempts to get above and close above the previous July high. We've now done it. But you'd be watching. Which way does it go? Do we start breaking down and then go up? We go down. We still could pull back. Again, we had a gap higher. You always want to watch a gap. Is it a gap and go, a gap and fill, gap and trap? And let me be clear. Again, I believe by late September, early to mid-October, we're going to see the S&P peak. I don't think that the S&P is topping now. It'll be a short-term top. I think it will still go higher, 5750, which we hit 5753, to the 6,000 level. Nasdaq still has to fill that gap. We'll be watching what becomes of these divergences. Got one down here on the MACD as well. We'll see what happens. Do we pull back? Do we just fill the gap? And again, does the Dow start peaking ahead of the S&P 500? Again, if you're hearing me say S&P is about to crash right now, you're not listening to what I'm saying. Nasdaq's going to go up and fill the gap at 20,400. Eventually, S&P will go higher. And I think that is going to be the next couple weeks, or maybe multiple weeks here, 2 or 3 weeks, maybe as much as 4. I think we see a topping process complete. I say that because, again, some people only hear what they want to hear. They hear me talk about the bear market portion of it. Don't listen to me saying, hey, S&P and Nasdaq rally is likely going to continue. I say that, I'm sure you understand, I still think S&P has not topped yet. It's very possible the Dow is topping. We are seeing the negative divergence here go up, and we just slightly overthrow the trend line here. Now, I'm not as certain as I was when I called the top on Nasdaq. I was pretty certain, so I had multiple levels of confirmation. You can see the divergences here for yourself here on the MACD. So I'm still in the camp of, I think, Dow is forming a topping process. It is forming multiple points of divergence in the weekly time frame, forming that bearish divergence, triple bearish divergence on the RSI and the MACD. If we do get a pullback, it may top. S&P still may go make new highs. Nasdaq goes and fills a gap at 20,400. I was also forming some divergences on the 60-minute chart here. Again, these divergences may not be complete yet. See them complete tomorrow, but we'll be watching these 60-minute charts.